Well, it's a new week and exciting things are happening, and we welcome you to this edition of the 700 Club. The United States is, quote, locked and loaded. That's what UN Ambassador Nikki Haley says in terms of the potential of another strike against Syria if Bashar Assad uses chemical weapons against his own people for another time.
And the Trump administration is getting ready to impose yet another round of sanctions on Russia for its support of Assad's murderous regime. Eric Rosales brings us the story of the attack on Syria's chemical weapons facilities and what comes next.
The ruins of Syria's chemical weapons facilities. A scientific research center north of Damascus used for development, production, and testing of chemical weapons, along with 2 other facilities, were destroyed. The Pentagon says the strike set the Syrian chemical weapons program back years. It was a precision strike, more than 100 missiles fired in a one-time shot, more than double the firepower than last year's strike on a Syrian base.
I think the words cripple and degrade are good, accurate words.
Before and after satellite images show the targeted buildings wiped away, bird marks still visible.
We are confident that we've significantly degraded his ability to ever use chemical weapons again.
Over the weekend, U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Nikki Haley had a strong message for Syria's President Bashar al-Assad.
If the Syrian regime uses this poisonous gas again, the United States is locked and loaded.
Analysts say Russia has propped up the Syrian president, and later today, the Trump administration is expected to unleash another blow, this time targeting Russia. The Kremlin will face its 3rd round of new sanctions in the past 4 weeks, punishing it for enabling the Syrian government's use of chemical weapons in its civil war.
Russian sanctions will be coming down, and they will go directly to any sort of companies that were dealing with equipment related to Assad and chemical weapons use.
Russian President Vladimir Putin warned Sunday that further Western attacks on Syria would bring chaos to world affairs. The Kremlin adding the chemical attack was faked by Western intelligence agencies. Pat, Pentagon officials tell CBN News further U.S. airstrikes are still a possibility.
Well, Eric, does it look like the Trump administration to think it'll actually, Assad is going to provoke another attack?
Well, like United Nations ambassador, or U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley said, that is ultimately up to Assad himself. You know, look, right now, our main concern is still to defeat ISIS in the area, but Syria currently has about 13 million without food and water, and about 6 million that are still displaced from their homes, and about 2 million of those are children. So our work there is long from over. But one thing's for sure, that if Assad does plan another chemical weapon attack, the United States, as you heard, is locked and loaded. But one thing, this sends a strong message to Syrians and Russian allies, including North Korea, that the United States is ready for another attack.
Well, Eric, it looks like Russia had been huffing and puffing that they were going to block our missiles and they were going to shoot them down, and then they want to retaliate. It looks like they're a paper tiger. Is that a fair assessment or not?
I would have to say that is a fair assessment, but at the same time, Pentagon and Homeland Security sources do tell me, although it is unlikely Russia will actually commit a military strike, what they're afraid of is a cyber attack. And as I've reported before in previous reports, that Russia has already gotten inside of our power grid, and right now, you know, their cyber unit is strong, but you know, Americans have to understand that our cyber unit, both in the private sector and both the military sector, is strong as well. But, you know, the main thing right now is they're concerned of a cyber attack possibly in U.S. hospitals or possibly in our financial departments, so with banks and things like that.
Well, thank you, Eric. It's horrible to contemplate, but, you know, the NSA has the most sophisticated cyber technology in the world. And if we wanted to turn that capability loose on Russia, we could decimate that country. And I think they realize that. We have much more powerful weapons at our disposal that we've never used, and we can use them. Well, in other news, former FBI Director James Comey is lashing out at President Trump. and the president is firing back. It's not a very pleasant thing to watch.
That's right, Pat. Comey says President Trump is morally unfit to be president. This from an ABC News exclusive with George Stephanopoulos Sunday night. Comey's first since President Trump fired him almost a year ago, and as he promotes a new book. Caitlin Burke has the story.
James Comey has broken his silence, and he's not sugarcoating his thoughts about the man who fired him.
President must embody respect and adhere to the values that are at the core of this country, the most important being truth. This president is not able to do that. He is morally unfit to be president.
In an exclusive interview with ABC's George Stephanopoulos, Comey detailed what he considered some of the most controversial moments of his career. Among them, reopening the Hillary Clinton email investigation just ahead of the 2016 presidential election. Comey said he had no choice because that's where the investigation led him.
Norm is, if you can avoid it, you take no action that might have an impact on an election. And I can't see a door that's labeled no action here.
Still, he expressed disgust that that investigation could have influenced the election, which Trump won, in an upset that stunned Washington.
A whole lot of me was thinking, oh my God, did we have some role in this?
But he says if he were given the chance to do it over, he would, because he says he wouldn't want to be influenced by politics.
If I ever start considering whose political fortunes will be affected by a decision, we're done. We're just another player in the tribal battle.
Comey compared Trump to a mob boss.
Not trying to, by the way, suggest that President Trump is out breaking legs and shaking down shopkeepers. But instead what I'm talking about is that leadership culture.
Ahead of the interview Sunday night, President Trump lashed out on Twitter, calling Comey the worst FBI director in history and saying it was his great honor to fire him. Comey says the American public needs to vote Trump out of office in 2020, saying it's a duty they're bound to do directly rather than be let off the hook by impeachment. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
Thanks, Caitlin. Pat, clearly no love lost between these two men.
Well, it's not, but I'm telling you, this Comey is bad actor. You know, it's amazing that the Democrats uniformly wanted to get him out. I mean, they were opposed to him because he started talking about Hillary Clinton, and then now he's become a saint, and they want to, you know, protect him and blame Trump for his firing. I think that Trump would have been better off if he'd had an attorney general who could have done that for him instead of doing it directly. But nevertheless, the FBI, from all indications, which is a very respected organization, has gotten dirt all over itself. Because you look at the trail of attacks against Trump and the statements that he wasn't fit to be president, and they were trying to tip the scales in favor of Hillary Clinton. There's no question about it. It just wasn't a good thing. And now it's the Justice Department is stonewalling a congressional committee that's trying to get information. And they said, well, it'll take, 3 years maybe to tell you about that dossier that came out, that infamous Steele dossier. And, what's wrong with the FBI? I used to have great admiration for the FBI. As a matter of fact, I spoke at an FBI meeting up in Washington and got a plaque from them, and I appreciated what they've done. And to see and for him to sit there and say, well, this man's like a mob boss, and he doesn't have character, and then you ask yourself about Bill Clinton and the fact that he was indicted for lying and all the rest of the stuff, and then his wife, who knows what all she's been doing, and all the emails, et cetera, and he elected not to recommend any criminal prosecution against her. I mean, it's a sickening mess. And I wish we could get that Inspector General's report. I mean, it's time that thing get released, because I do think there's some very damaging information about the FBI. I'm sorry to see it. John.
Pat, the trial of a North Carolina pastor imprisoned in Turkey got underway today. Pastor Andrew Brunson faces 35 years in prison. The 50-year-old evangelical preacher, along with his family, have lived in Turkey for 23 years, where he leads a church. He was arrested in December 2016 and later charged with espionage. Turkey's President Erdogan said his country would release Brunson if the United States would hand over a controversial Muslim cleric who lives in Pennsylvania. Turkey blames Fethullah Gulen for masterminding a failed coup, which he denies. The American Center for Law and Justice has called Brunson a hostage of the Turkish government and says his only crime is living out his Christian faith. More than 500,000 people have signed a petition calling for Brunson's release, and you can find that link to the petition on cbnnews.com. Well, former First Lady Barbara Bush has decided not to seek additional medical treatment for her failing health. A family spokesperson says the 92-year-old will instead focus on comfort care without elaborating more about her condition. The wife of former President Bush has been battling congestive heart failure and was hospitalized several times over the last year in Houston. A statement from the former president's office said it will not surprise those who know her that Barbara Bush has been a rock in the face of her failing health, worrying not for herself, thanks to her abiding faith, but for others. Barbara Bush and former President Bush have been married for 73 years. Pat?
Well, I want to say Barbara Bush is a simply marvelous lady, and those of us who know her are sad that her health would be failing. But that's what happens when you gain certain numbers of years in your life. Things begin to happen that aren't too pleasant to your health. But anyhow, I would ask prayer for her. She's a wonderful person, and she's been a great rock for that entire family, and especially for her husband. So it's a wonderful lady. Please pray for Barbara Bush. John.
Well, Pat, conservatives are supporting and liberals are criticizing President Trump's pardon of Louis Scooter Libby Friday. The president said he had heard for years that Libby, a former top aide to Vice President Dick Cheney, had been treated unfairly by a special counsel. Critics question the timing of the pardon, wondering if it was designed to send a message to the special counsel on Russia that the president could pardon others as well. But White House spokeswoman Sarah Huckabee Sanders said that wasn't the case. Conservatives have rallied around Libby, arguing he was the victim of an overly zealous and politically motivated prosecution by a special counsel. Pat, back to you.
You know, there was a fellow named Patrick Fitzgerald who knew all along who had leaked Valerie Plame's identity. They knew good and well it wasn't Scooter Libby. He knew it. Patrick Fitzgerald knew it. And yet he continued to hammer away at this man till he caught him in one little thing that he said was a misstatement of fact. And then they prosecuted him and convicted him of lying to a federal prosecutor. And Scooter Libby, who was a splendid man, went to jail. This is a pardon that was long overdue. George Bush should have pardoned him a long time ago. He did not pardon him. And I congratulate President Trump in doing it. Some are saying, well, what's the deal on this one? Is he saying to somebody, behave yourself and I've got your back? Maybe, maybe, maybe not. But Scooter Libby, long, but that one man, that shows what one of these special prosecutors can do. They roam at will, and they can do terrible damage to innocent people. And they should be restrained, and that's why this Mueller thing should be brought to a conclusion speedily. But that other man, they let him go for year after year after year. They get unlimited funds and unlimited privileges, and look what happened. I mean, the innocent people get sent to prison. So in any event, good for you, Mr. President. Thank you.